It's time for the Fourth and Fantasy podcast. Right here, right now. Let's go.
Before we even dive into this 8th episode of the Fourth and Fantasy podcast, I want to go ahead and make it known, yes, I am aware I didn't upload a video last week. I am sorry, sometimes life hits you get a little busy, and you have some other stuff to do. But luckily, we are back this week for the 8th episode of the Fourth and Fantasy podcast. And if you are tuning in, I thank you so much for listening. And with that being said, it is Thursday, November 20th, and we are in store for some Thursday night football tonight to kick off this 12th week, I believe, of the NFL season. We have the Bills going down to Houston to visit the Texans, who are a little beat up, especially quarterback CJ Stroud, who's being filled in for by Davis Mills. So we'll see if it's the Bills Mafia or the Mills Mafia that takes over tonight at 8:15 on Thursday Night Football. That was a terrible joke, I know. But either way, there's your Thursday Night Football preview for tonight. And let's get into some of the action from Week 11 last week. And as always, we are going to start off with our good category. So, headlining things here today, rightfully so, was last year's MVP and this past week's 42.68 point score, Bills quarterback Josh Allen, who had not only 357 total yards, but added on 3 passing touchdowns and 3 rushing touchdowns for a total of 6 there. So when talking about Josh Allen, everybody knows about, the mobility, the dual threat, but I think what makes Josh Allen so impressive is the fact that he's able to do that at his size. I mean, he is a big dude, and he's still able to move so well, create those rushing opportunities. We see him run the ball a few times every game for positive yards. He's good about, staying away from any losses. He doesn't get sacked a whole lot, and I think that Josh Allen's mobility really just adds a whole nother level of depth that honestly that Bills offense needs. Especially, they have somewhat of a lack at talent at the receiver position. Tight ends are fine, honestly. And, Josh Allen being able to create those plays outside of the pocket, whether it be through the air or using his legs, really expands that offense to a whole nother level and is one of the reasons, why they are consistently a contender and have been the past few seasons and doing so well this year. Now, this next guy I want to talk about was probably the biggest surprise from last week, I would say, for everyone, and it is Sean Tucker of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Now, if you would have told me last week that Sean Tucker was going to have 34 fantasy points of his own, I would have said, well, that's pretty incredible. How'd he do it? He had 19 rushes for 106 yards, so he got over that century mark, and had 2 rushing touchdowns, which is great in and of itself. But he also added in 2 receptions for 34 yards and a receiving touchdown. So 3 total touchdowns for Sean Tucker, as I mentioned, over 100 yards rushing, adding in the 34 receiving yards, 106 plus 34, quick math. 140 total yards, 3 touchdowns for Mr. Tucker this past week. Just so impressive what he's been able to do. And it's crazy to me how the Buccaneers can consistently add new faces to this offense. And, with a guy like Baker at quarterback and with this game plan that Tampa Bay runs, you really don't know week to week. I mean, you're going to have your guys, which, the past decade, it's been Mike Evans, who's kind of been your consistent guy. This year, we've seen Ibuka do it a lot when he's been healthy. Obviously, I think Bucky Irving might be coming back for Week 12, potentially. It seems to be leaning that way as of now, but not 100% confirmed on that yet. And regardless, this Tampa Bay offense always seems to be able to add another layer and always have a guy who flies under the radar and then is going to have a week like this, like Sean Tucker just had, and break out onto the scene, which is great to see. It makes them unpredictable. It makes them hard to scout, and definitely a matchup nightmare for a lot of other teams in the league. And last but not least, on the good category in this segment is a rookie receiver from the Arizona Wildcats, took a plane east, and now he is in Carolina with the Panthers, and that is T-Mac, or Tet McMillan, whatever you want to call him, he had 33 points of his own, 8 catches for 130 and 2 scores. So I think that the Panthers offense, and I watched a little bit of the Panthers game, I didn't get to watch all of it, but you go and look at the stats, and I know I'm talking about Tet McMillan right now, but a guy you have to shout out is Bryce Young, who had easily, I would say, the best game of his career, broke out onto the scene. I believe he had around 450 passing yards. I'm not exactly sure. I can get that pulled up real quick to make sure I am not on here telling lies. Yeah, he had 448 on 69% completion, 3 touchdowns, as I mentioned, 2 of those going to Tet McMillan. So with these two young guys, this quarterback and receiver, if they can keep building the chemistry, they get on the same page. I mean, Rico Dowdle's been awesome this year when he's been in that running back one role. So really, this is a Carolina team that maybe fans and other teams need to start taking seriously because, we've essentially mocked the Panthers ever since their Super Bowl 50 loss to the Broncos. Cam Newton, a kind of a 1 year wonder. I shouldn't say that, but, having that MVP season, not able to finish the job, and kind of just been a downhill spiral ever since. Bryce Young has had a lot of question marks hanging over his head since his debut into the league as the first overall pick, 2023, and now you're starting to see the chemistry build a little bit. You're seeing Rico Dowdle be a huge part of this rushing attack. They have a great uh, kind of two-man punch there if Chuba Hubbard can stay healthy and he's still willing to contribute in whatever role he's given. And now you have T-Mac, who is stepping up, in the second part of his rookie season, who also he wasn't bad in the first half of the rookie of this year. But now this team is really finding its form. They've surprised a lot of people this year. And one thing that I really like about this Panthers team is they're always going to fight through games. Now, I know Atlanta has pretty significantly underperformed this year, which is who this team faced and got an overtime win against, actually, in this past week. But there was times throughout that game that the Panthers, they were like, "Oh, are we gonna fall flat on our face? Are we gonna be able to, because everyone knows how dangerous Atlanta's offense can be. But you stick in there, it goes to overtime, and then you're able to clean up the pieces and finish the job. And all of a sudden, now you're looking at a Panthers team who sits above 500. They're going to San Francisco this coming week, actually a primetime game. So be on the lookout for that. But now this Carolina team kind of holds its own destiny as far as reaching the playoffs here this season. Well, now we're going to have to step back a little bit and go over to the bad category. Now, luckily, for a lot of players who might have underperformed this week, I'm going to overlook you because essentially I am talking about one team here and 4 guys or fantasy positions, you could say, that I want to mention. And I'm sure most of you already know who I'm going to say, and that is the Los Angeles Chargers, who lost 6-35 on the road at Jacksonville. Now, not that Jacksonville's a bad team by any means, but you go on the road as a promising team. You've done good things. Obviously, they were blazing hot to start the season. They've had a few bumps and hiccups in between them, but you go on the road to Jacksonville and lose by pretty much 30 points at this point in the year is just not what you want to see. So let's start off with the man at the helm for this Chargers team, Justin Herbert, who only had 3.34 points. And then we'll move to the other guy in the backfield. Well, actually, no. Let's not talk about Vidal yet. Let's save Vidal for a moment because I want to talk about some of the good he's done too. I don't want to just sit here and dog on a guy who has done decent, stepping into a tough role in this Chargers team. So let's talk about Quentin Johnston, who, saying that, there's not much to talk about. He put up 0 points, had 0 catches. And the last thing I want to talk about, and I'm sure it's kind of clear from me already saying the score, but the Chargers defense had -2 points. You give up 35 to Jacksonville. And I just wrote on here as a note that everyone else got lucky. So if you didn't perform very well this past week, but you don't play for the Los Angeles Chargers, then consider yourself lucky because I'm just going to be dogging on the Chargers for a little bit here. So, as I said, I wanted to save Kimani Vidal for last year. He only had 5 carries, so really didn't get the opportunity. 13 rushing yards, 2.6 yards per carry. The longest rush all day was 4 yards. Now, Vidal has been solid these past few weeks. I know they had Pittsburgh the week before. He scored, had almost 100 yards. I think they had Tennessee the week before that. He wasn't great, but he was better than he was this past week. And then the week before that, we were all watching that Thursday night football game at home versus the Vikings, where he had 23 carries for 117 and a score and averaged 5.1 yards per carry. So this offense, I'm not really sure what happened this past week. I've talked about them a lot. We've had some X Factor Player of the Weeks like Lad McConkey. His name has been mentioned, and at this point in the season, you would think everything's going to be clicking a little bit better. Now I know that this Jaguars defense isn't really a slouch. I believe Josh Hines Allen is healthy, which he's obviously a game wrecker in his own right, kind of on that linebacker slash edge position that we see a lot of star pass rushers take on. But I mean, if you're the Chargers, you can't be going to Jacksonville and only putting up 6 points and especially if you're going to give up 35. So hopefully that was just kind of a 1 week thing for the Chargers. I believe they host the Las Vegas Raiders at home this next week, so divisional matchup in the AFC West there, and hopefully now they have kind of a chance to regain their ground and bounce back after last week's disaster. And it is that time in the episode where we are going to go to our X Factor Player of the Week. Hopefully we get a little sirens going, get the crowd pumped up a little bit. But X Factor Player of the Week, like I said, no episode last week. Totally my bad. Got distracted with some other things. So a fresh slate this week here. We don't have anyone to look back on. We are just looking ahead to this week. And my X Factor Player of the Week is a guy who, if you told me at the beginning of the year I was going to be picking him, I would probably be very confused or understand for the reason I am picking him. And the guy I am picking is the replacement for Detroit Lions star tight end Sam Laporta, who we've seen be so solid for this team. The past few seasons, a lot of success. And, it feels like, speaking of the Lions, it feels like they are really just sneaking closer and closer to finally capturing that title under Dan Campbell. I mean, the work he's done there has been excellent. He has totally changed a franchise that nobody took seriously for a long time, pretty much. I mean, during his playing period there, all the way to when Dan Orlovsky was the quarterback. And now a team who has a lot to look forward to, a bright future. They are 6-4 right now, which isn't the greatest, but obviously I think it's safe to say that they will probably get into the playoffs. A lot of people are expecting them to. And at the end of the day, it really doesn't matter what seed you are in the playoffs, because last year they were that 1 seed in the NFC, got a week off. Washington came in there to Ford Field in Detroit and beat them. So, and they have the Giants coming up this week, who obviously are extremely beat up with quarterback Jackson Dart, concussion, the ankle injury from breakout running back Cam Scatabo. So, maybe the Lions have a chance this week to move to 7-4, and then you're just slowly kind of inching your way towards, that 10-win threshold that really makes you feel safe and in the playoffs, or 9 wins even in some cases. But regardless, the guy I am going with this week is the replacement for tight end Sam Laporta, and that is going to be Brock Wright. Now, yesterday at practice, so Wednesday's practice on November 19th, he was limited because of an ankle injury. However, He's still slated to play as of right now. Now, one thing I want to mention, you go look at the stats. He only has 11 catches this year for 79 yards, but in those 11 catches, he's scored twice. So don't be surprised if the Lions get down in the red zone and every better ever is praying for Jahmyr Gibbs or Amon-Ra to score, and all of a sudden the Lions run a little bit of their trickery and Brock Wright finds himself with his third touchdown of the season. That's all I'm going to say. Don't be surprised. Obviously, like I said, everyone's betting on Gibbs to score, Amon-Ra to score, whoever, whatever the case is, those studs for that team. But the Lions like to run some trickery, throw some teams off, and you're playing a Giants team who, isn't having the greatest season, but still has a lot to look forward to in the future. So don't be surprised if they throw in a little bootleg or a little trick play call and Brock Wright gets his way back into the end zone. But that's really all I have as far as talking about him. Look out for him this week. Hopefully he is healthy and ready to go this coming weekend. Well, with that all being said, that's really all I have for this week's episode. I know I didn't have an interview, but hey, maybe I thought you guys would like to hang out with just me for a change. Probably not, but potentially. But like I said, with that being said, that's going to wrap up this week's episode of the Fourth and Fantasy Podcast. If you enjoyed it, please like and subscribe to the YouTube channel and share this episode with some friends that you think might need some fantasy football knowledge for this upcoming week, or just want a nice little recap of last week's action. So with that being said, I'm Riley Burnett, and I thank you so much for listening here on the Fourth and Fantasy Podcast.